Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs.
Bows and TKOs. We are live, episode 61, coming at you on this beautiful Tuesday evening in the valley. Yes, I always say it, but it is still hot. Triple digits, scorching desert life. But I am excited to talk about this week's MMA showdown, really. This week we get a recap or preview the PFL playoffs. It's going down on Friday. Dana White Contender Series going down tonight. We will talk about that next week, as well as the next Ultimate Fighter episode. But we are recapping UFC Fight Night Vegas 95, and we are previewing UFC 305, back on some pay-per-view action. And also this weekend, we have the ADCC and CJI grappling tournaments going down. I'm going to put that on the list for next week, as we will discuss how those shake out, especially with the CGI and the $1 million payout. But regardless, we're going to jump right in. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. Again, episode 61, Bows and TKOs, weekly MMA podcast, streaming anywhere you get podcasts and videos on YouTube. So not a lot of fights that have been announced thus far since last week, but we have Anthony Smith and Dominic Reyes for UFC 310. Long ways out there, but a fun light heavyweight showdown that's going on. The UFC also announced that it will be returning to Tampa Bay December 14th for a fight night card, likely to be the final bout of 2024 before the Christmas holidays. And they have, I don't think, announced a date, but have announced that this year they will be returning to China for a fight night card as well. The PFL doing their best UFC pay-per-view impression, stacking the Francis Ngannou pay-per-view, adding the young up-and-coming Paul Hughes, throwing him right into the deep end, taking on former Bellator, current PFL stud AJ McKee. So a true test for Paul Hughes on that October pay-per-view for what, best product probably for what the PFL could put out so far. We also have, because you have the Ngannou fight, this fight, then you have the Larissa Pacheco showdown against, what is her name? Anyways, it's a good showdown. But this weekend we have the PFL playoffs kicking off again this week. The light heavyweights and lightweights. Chris Cyborg is who I blinked on, by the way. This is going down in Hollywood, Florida. Prelims at 3 p.m. Pacific. The main card at 6 p.m. Pacific on ESPN. The prelims only on ESPN Plus. Not a lot of great action here, but we have Impa Kasaganay taking on Joshua Silveira. Rob Wilkinson and Dovletzan Yagshamuradov. We have Brett Primus versus Clay Collard. So some solid fights, nothing too fantastic to write home about, but if you want that PFL action, you can get it. I just really haven't been, really overwhelmed by the PFL product, production, announcing crew, fights, the whole nine. And then the Olympics in Paris wrapped up. We had some awesome wrestling. We had Amit Allure win gold for the women's 68 kilogram. We had Sarah Hildebrandt with the gold as well in the women's 50. Sadly, no gold for men's USA, but Spencer Lee did get the silver at 57 kilograms. Kennedy Blades got the silver with that awesome throw. Aaron Brooks, Penn State alum, got the bronze at 86 kilograms, and Kyle Dake at 74. A little surprised to see them get bronzes, and Kyle Snyder with a 5th place. And then also Helen Maruli with a bronze in women's 57. So Japan stealing the show in the men's freestyle. USA kind of getting thrown around. But this weekend at T-Mobile and at the Thomas & Mack, you have the ADCC and CGI tournaments. The ADCC only a couple years. And CGI if you haven't known, is really competing to try to get fighter pay, so they have that $1 million payout. So it'll be interesting to see how those matches go and how the CGI compares to ADCC. But this past Saturday, we had the lackluster UFC Fight Night Vegas 95 card. Picks-wise did go well. I went 6-2 on the picks. So overall, that puts me at 371 wins, 185 losses, 7 no contests or draws. So on the year, I'm at 178 wins, 99 losses, 4 no contests or draws. If I were to give you a quick recap on the card, there really wasn't one exciting fight the entire night. I watched it on demand on Sunday. Glad I didn't waste my Saturday. Spent some quality time with the girlfriend. But the headline for me was the performance by Youssef Zalal. That's who I said was probably the more intriguing fight, although he showed out and didn't make it a great fight. A guy that I'm really excited to see how his next few steps are in the UFC. And then obviously Sergey Spivak, nice performance, but didn't even call out an opponent. I thought he had the opportunity headlining the main event. Just kind of a quiet guy. It was hard to watch, though, even for me as a diehard MMA fan. I'm giving this card a 1 out of 10 on the delivery. I think I previewed it a 4 out of 10, but there was a lot of fights that got scrapped off in some short notices the week of. A good fight we did not break down. We had Toshiomi Kazama with a round 2 submission via triangle choke over Charalampos Griori. Performance of the night, 50 G's for Kazama. And very grappling heavy first round for him. Kind of was getting dominated in the second round, but was able to sink in a triangle choke. So props to him for that victory. But we will kick it off in the prelims where Youssef Zalal had the rear 1 submission via rear naked choke over Jarno Arenz. Performance of the night, 50 G's for Youssef. And this card was so lackluster. Anyone that got a finish got the 50 G performance bonus. But for Zalal, I did expect him to show out and showcase his abilities, but he over-delivered here. He controlled the chaos early. Jarno, as typical, is looking to make the fight a scrap. Came at Zalal with some big, powerful shots, but Zalal was able to easily combo some strikes into a takedown. And right once Aarons tried to turn near the cage to kind of get up, you kind of give your back up to stand up. Zalal took his back, locked in a body triangle, and rear naked choke with ease. Quick finish for Youssef Zalal. As much as I'm stoked for him, I'm in a survivor pool eliminator on MMA Twitter, MMA X, I guess you could call it. MMA Wizard is the guy leading it, and the payout was like $2,500, $2,200. There was only 7 of us left, and because no one got eliminated the week before, you have to choose not only one fighter to win, but you have to choose how they're going to win. I chose Zalal as a decision versus by finish. He got the finish. I was eliminated. A little bummed about that. But, in round 1, what Zalal did as easy as he made it look. It could be a challenge to take someone's back, get in that body triangle while someone's still fresh. He made slight work out of it. So again, beautiful performance by Youssef Zalal. And welcome back to the UFC. Statistically, Youssef landed 10 total insignificant strikes with the takedown. He was 1 for 2 in his takedown attempts. He had a submission attempt in 1 minute and 8 seconds of control time. And Jarno landed 7 total and 6 significant strikes. So Youssef extends his winning streak to 5. He's 5-0-1 since 2022, 2-0-1 in the UFC. And Jarno extends his new losing streak, or starts a new losing streak, and is 1-3 in the UFC since 2022. So what's next? Well, I would love to see Youssef take on Julian Erosa. He's still young. This is his second stint. We don't have to, fly him up the ladder board. This is a tough veteran fight. I like it. And Jarno, he could take on Blake Builder, another veteran in the division. Moving on to the light heavyweights, we had Janata Deniz with a unanimous decision over Carl Williams. A fight I got wrong. Not too shocked, I guess. But this was really supposed to be Deniz having another grappling test. A clash of style showdown. But Carl never really had legit and real takedown attempts. It was more so when Deniz had rocked him, he kind of came in like a stumbling bull for a double leg, but it wasn't really a committed double leg takedown attempt. but Janata was able to piece up Carl at range with leg kicks. He had a nice jab and, really had him rocked in round 1. And I was shocked that Deniz didn't pounce on Carl to try to get the finish, but I thought he should have. Was a little lackluster that this went to decision, but he was just okay with letting the fight go there. Outdo Carl on the scorecards, not put himself in danger. That's not really going to boost your stock as a new face at 33 years old in the UFC. I don't think he really did himself favors there. But for Carl, I'm shocked at what his game plan was, why he wouldn't go for broke for takedowns, like he did in his previous fights. He was trying to strike with Janata from distance, and that just really isn't going to work against a kickboxer. But for Carl being a 10-1 pro, he didn't look the part and doesn't look to be like a top 20 heavyweight whatsoever. I did see someone on X saying that his sparring partner trains with Carl and saying that the UFC brass had reached out to Carl and saying that if you keep doing grappling heavy fights, it won't lead to an extension. If that is true, I mean, this is very, very hearsay, but there was a lot of rumblings on X and a guy saying his sparring partner told him that because his sparring partner was like, why didn't you go for takedowns? I would be really bummed because I understand Dana and the UFC brass is clearly looking for knockouts and exciting fights. But for me, being a longtime UFC fan, there's a lot of guys that lived off grappling and the ability to mix it in well. Sure, yeah, you don't have to do 20 takedown attempts, Merab Dvalishvili style with no strikes. But it's part of the game. It's mixed martial arts. Wrestlers came into the sport, had a lot of success. Grappling's part of the game. It adds to the IQ of like, hey, I'm here. If I can have that takedown, I can do it. I can wear on him, steal the round at the end with the takedown. I would really be bummed if that's the case. I would like to give Dana and them more props and think that that's not the case. But there has been some rumblings about fighters saying that if they do that, they won't be re-signed. And then we had the Muhammad Makayev issue earlier. So a lot of weird, things that I don't like there. Where there's smoke, there's fire. That's what they always say. But I'm hoping that's not the case because I still like guys that can mix in the grappling. And that's part of the game. If you can't defend it, yeah. If I'm fighting for my life and I have a strength and you have a weakness, I'm going to take advantage of it. Regardless, Deniz landed 63 total strikes, 59 of them significant, compared to Carl's 49 total strikes, 29 of them significant. He had 2 takedowns in 5 attempts and 2 minutes and 39 seconds of control time. So, Carl, who is usually a grappling heavy guy, I would say out of those 5 takedown attempts, 2 of them were legit. Those are the ones he got the takedowns in, had a little bit of a control time. Late in the fight, though, it was way too little too late at that point. But you look, it's like, okay, he was trying to kickbox from distance. He only threw off 49 total strikes and only landed 29 of them significant. So just a very brutal situation in general. And that if that was his game plan, just the math ain't mathing. It's just not making sense. But regardless, Deniz stays undefeated, extends his winning streak to 8, 3-0 in the UFC, and Carl ends his 7-fight winning streak. He is now 4-1 in the UFC with his first UFC loss. So what's next? Well, I would love to see Janata and Waldo Cortez Acosta. I think that would be a fun dance with Salsa Boy. A good kickboxing affair, a good stylistic matchup. The winner can be right in the top 15. And for Carl, he could take on Dontel Mays, another solid veteran that I think would be a great matchup. Then moving on, we had Carl Hossa with a unanimous decision over Pannie Kianzad. And this fight was very lopsided. I thought this would be a closer fight, but Carol was pouring it on Pannie right out the gates. And it really started with Carol slaughtering Kianzad's lead leg. I mean, brutal leg kicks. And Carol just kept the leg kick momentum going from her last fight with Irene Aldana, where she broke the record for most kicks for a woman. Maybe even anybody, but at least a woman. And seeing that film on tape, you're fighting, you're a pro, you look at the people and what they're doing in their last fights, maybe what their style is. You would assume Pannie would have been ready for the kicks somewhat. That wasn't, how can I move around to avoid the leg kicks? She wasn't even trying to check them. It just did not seem like she was prepared for that, which kind of baffles you. But Pannie, if you could give her props, she showed off her toughness And Hosa showcased that she doesn't just have to live off of grappling anymore. She could just live in the striking department. She's becoming a very well-rounded fighter, a serious contender in the bantamweight division, because she used to fight bigger at the featherweight while that was still there. So really interested to see how the future shakes out for Carol Hosa with a dominant performance. And statistically, she landed 140 total strikes, 117 of them significant with a takedown. She went 1 for 2 in takedowns and had 4 minutes and 24 seconds of control time. And Pani landed 138 total strikes, 92 of them significant. Although the volume looks somewhat similar to Carol, she had quite a few less significant, but total, it was not even close. Panties were a lot of touchy-feely shots. But Carol starts a new winning streak. She's an even 3-3 since 2022. She stays at 8 in the rankings. And Pani extends her losing streak to 3. She drops to 1-3 since 2022 and moves down 1 spot in the rankings to number 12. So what's next for these ladies? I would love to see Carol and Holly Holm. I think that would be a lot of fun. If Holly wants to continue fighting, that's a quality opponent that makes sense. And for Pani, if she's still in the UFC, how about Chelsea Chandler, who also was in this fight card that we'll talk about in a minute. But speaking of, we jump into the main card. We had Yana Santos with a unanimous decision over Chelsea Chandler. A fight that I actually originally picked Chelsea, but due to the weigh-ins, missing weight, and looking at her body language, I swapped my picks. Glad I did. But not a lot happened in this fight, to be honest with you. Yana clearly was letting her frustration out on Chelsea for missing weight by not 1, not 3, but 5 freaking pounds, which is just insane for a woman. And she was just landing big shots and kicks early and had Chandler on wobbly legs. But as the fight wore on into rounds 2 and round 3, there was less significant strikes thrown. It was more of a tit-for-tat in exchanges. There was clinches with some tit-for-tat strikes. And Chelsea actually threw more strikes in round 3 than she did in the entire fight. So I don't know what took Chelsea so long to get going. I think Yana, probably very emotional in this fight, kind of emptied the tank early, but clearly was the better striker. And Chelsea not having a lot of grappling success. This was all Santos, which is big for her. Statistically, Yana landed 135 total strikes, 94 of them significant. She had a knockdown and a minute of control time. And Chelsea landed 73 total strikes, 56 of them significant, with 2 minutes and 41 seconds of control time. So you could see, almost half the amount that Yana landed. Chelsea was just kind of trying to survive round 1 and then, finally put some volume out in round 3. But Yana ends her 3-fight losing streak. She does start a new winning streak. This has to feel fantastic for her. Her first win since 2021, February of 2021. She does move up 2 spots in the rankings to number 10. And Chelsea starts a new losing streak. She is 2-2 in the UFC. And she moves down 1 spot in the rankings to number 15. So what's next? I would love to see Yana square up with Julia Avila, while Chelsea could fight Stephanie Ager. That is, if she's still with the UFC. She's missed weight numerous times. Hasn't put a good quality product out there. Would not be surprised if it went that way. But finally, some action. The fight of the night, we had Chepe Mariscal with a unanimous decision over Damon Jackson. And coming into this fight, I know the offensive brute force that Chepe brings, but I figured Damon would be able to neutralize some of that with his grappling, and he isn't really necessarily scared to get in a scrap. But Chepe put on an absolute masterclass against a very good veteran in Damon. And clearly Damon wanted to bring a grappling-heavy approach and be aggressive with it as he went for that right out the gates. But Chepe was able to hang, man. He used his strength to throw Jackson around, was able to get up after takedowns, land offense in the clinch. And when the fight was at range, Mariscal landed a ton of shots. He was in total control of the fight, controlling the center and the distance of the octagon. An absolute massive showing for Chepe as he moves up the ranks in the featherweight division. If anything, he would probably wish that he got a finish, because statistically you will see how lopsided this was over the course of 15 minutes. Now, Damon only landed 49 total strikes, 32 of which were significant. He was only 1 for 5 in takedown attempts. Again, credit to Chepe working on that takedown defense. It's improved a lot over the past year or so. Damon also had a reversal and 4 minutes and 18 seconds of control time. So landed less than 50 total strikes, had almost a round of control time. But Chepe landed 218 total strikes. I mean, quadrupling the output that Damon did, and 73 of them significant. And he brought some grappling himself. He went 5 for 7 on takedowns. So although Damon is known as the better grappler, he turned it on his head. He got 5 for 7, which is a brilliant percentage. If he wanted the takedown, he got it. He also reversed Damon twice and had 8 minutes and 31 seconds of control time. So about a round and a half. Again, brilliant display by Chepe. He extends his winning streak to 7. He is now 4-0 in the UFC. And Damon starts a new losing streak, moves to 4-3 since 2022. He has been active. But what's next? For a guy that's so offensively aggressive, like Chepe's a guy that fights like he would be if he was your video game character. I'm not here to measure you out, wait to counter. I'm bringing my game plan to you until you stop it. I am going to be a brute force that tries to break you down over the course of 15 minutes. And imagine Chepe Mariscal and Edson Barboza. Absolutely fantastic. A win-win for everyone. And for Damon, he could scrap with Muhammad Naimov. Which then set us up for the main event. Did not go the way I expected, as Sergey Spivak had the round 1 submission via armbar over Marcin Tybura. Performance of the night, 50 G's for the polar bear. And I would have assumed Tybura would have been grappling heavy and been the one submitting. But this fight really didn't get going. Sergey was able to get a takedown after about a minute. They barely exchanged some strikes. Marcin had a big, powerful combo that whiffed. But as Tybura was able to get a takedown, Sergey got the takedown. Marcin reversed him, as the veteran, who probably has better grappling experience should. But after Sergey was moving his hips a little bit from bottom, he was able to secure an armbar from his back to get the quick tap and finish. Massive submission for Sergey. With the win like that, you'd want to call your shot on the mic, say something that the fans could relate to or be excited about, and he did not do that. But the fight only took 8 total strikes, 3 significant with the takedown for Sergey with that submission attempt, and Marcin only landed 9 total strikes with the reversal. So Sergey starts a new winning streak. He is 4-1 since 2022, and he moves up 2 spots to number 7. Tybura starts a new losing streak. He is 3-2 since 2022 and moves down 1 spot to number 9. Although he's almost 40, he has been active. So what's next? I think we get Sergey versus Sergey. We get the showdown against Sergey Pavlovich. And for Marcin, he could scrap with the veteran Derek Lewis, which is kind of shocking they haven't fought before. Regardless, let's move past that mediocre Apex card and go into UFC 305 in Perth, Australia, down under. We have the prelims, early prelims at 3:30 p.m. Pacific, the prelims at 5 p.m. Pacific, and then obviously the pay-per-view. I think these are on ESPN. Double check here. The prelims on ESPN, the early prelims on Fight Pass or ESPN Plus. All of it can be on ESPN Plus as well. For a little card preview, the main card's solid. The main event obviously has a ton of storylines. I would say the prelims do lack quantity and quality. There's not a full card on the early prelims, but a big step up from what we watched this past weekend at the Apex. There are 10 fighters with ties to Australia. Even guys like Izzy, who trains with City Kickboxing, technically not Australian, but a lot of what you would consider home fighters, and a lot of them are favored, so the home crowd should show out. Australia always shows out, puts on a good show. I'm previewing this for a pay-per-view, 5 out of 10. I think it could deliver higher, we'll see. Some good fights we will not break down. We have Song Kanan and Ricky Glenn, and then Contender Series alum Tom Nolan taking on Alex Reyes. But we will kick this off. We're not breaking down any early prelim fights. We do have 4 prelim fights, and we're kicking it off with Jack Farr Jenkins, 31 years old with a 12-3 record, taking on Herbert the Blaze Burns, 36 years old with an 11-5 record. Now, here we get the struggling Herbert Burns, who's looking to get his career back on track. He hasn't had a win since June of 2020, and he has only fought once since 2022. And Jack is just now hitting his prime at 31 years old, is looking to get the winning taste back in his mouth as he is 3-1 in the UFC. So, breaking it down, Jack is on a 1-fight losing streak. He is 3-1 in the UFC. He's a Contender Series alum. 5 of his 12 wins are via knockout, and all 3 of his losses are via submission. Now, Herbert has a BJJ and submission wrestling style. He has a 3rd-degree black belt in BJJ. He's a 1FC, Titan FC, and Contender Series alum. He is on a 3-fight losing streak and hasn't won since June of 2020. And he only has 3 UFC wins since 2019. 8 of his 11 wins are via submission, and 3 of his 5 losses are via knockout. He does have a 5.5-inch reach advantage. Now, I do think clearly Jack will have the striking advantage, but he has been susceptible to wrestling and jiu-jitsu. So if Herbert can find a way to get Jack down early and keep him there, not let him get back up, I do think this fight's going to flip around. But Herbert is really going to have an advantage on the mats. I just don't think it's going to get there, and if it does, stay there. I would say that Herbert can save some opportunities with his striking. He will have some opportunities to pick him apart at range, maybe find some knees, get in the clinch as a longer striker. But I doubt he's going to win the fight that way. For that reason, I'm going 1-0 Aussie. I'm taking Jack Jenkins. I am putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Sorry, I'm coming over a cold or something. But moving on, we have Casey King O'Neill, 26 years old with a 9-2 record and the number 15 next to her name, taking on Luana Santos, 24 years old with an 8-1 record. Now this fight, although it is super intriguing, is also more intriguing because it is a short notice affair. Casey was actually scheduled to fight Teresa Bleda, but she withdrew, so now we're getting Luana on a couple weeks' notice, and I think this is actually a tougher opponent for King Casey. Breaking this down, Casey has a kickboxing style. She trains out of Extreme Couture. She has a brown belt in BJJ. She was the 2021 Newcomer of the Year, and she's on a 2-fight losing streak. She is 1-2 since 2022. She hasn't been super active because she was recovering from that knee. Now, Luana is a PFL alum. She's on a 5-fight winning streak, 3-0 in the UFC, and 4 of her 8 wins are via submission. Now, Casey did not look good with her striking in her last bout. I mean, looked like she was declining, honestly. But I am giving her the benefit of the doubt that recovering from the knee injury was part of the process, and she did face solid competition and has fought better competition in her UFC career than Luana has. And Luana is going to look to bring a grappling heavy attack, get Casey down, find ways to get an open submission, and that is very possible. But I do think that Casey is not going to be held down throughout the fight. And when it comes to her striking, she will have a slight enough advantage with her kickboxing to win rounds. And the later the fight goes, I think it may benefit her to get more volume each round than Luana. Luana is going to throw big shots, but I don't think she'll land the technical clean straights that Casey will. For that reason, I am taking Casey O'Neill. I am avoiding this fight on any parlay where possible. Then we have Ricardo Carcainha Ramos, 29 years old with a 16-6 record, taking on Josh Kuya Kulabau, 30 years old with an 11-3-1 record. Now, this is a very fun stylistic matchup. This is a major fight for both men. So this one should deliver for the fans. And both men are just hitting their primes at 29 and 30 years old. They're looking to make waves in the featherweight division. And this is going to be a high volume fight, high paced fight with a lot of aggressive offense. And Ricardo hasn't been out the first round since 2021. And Josh has been in some very close decisions. So that does intrigue me. Breaking this down, Ricardo trains out of Team Alpha Male. He has a black belt in BJJ. He's a Legacy FC alum. He's on a 2-fight losing streak and is only 1-2 since 2022. 7 of his 16 wins are via submission, and 3 of his 6 losses are also via submission. So to submit or be submitted. Now Joshua has a purple belt in BJJ. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. He's 2-2 since 2022, and 5 of his 11 wins are via knockout. Now, I do think that Ricardo has more speed and options to strike with, but Josh definitely is the more technical and clean striker with his offense and probably even has better defense. Ricardo has been submitted via guillotine quickly in round 1 in back-to-back fights. And the win before that, he had won via spinning elbow knockout in round 1, so he hasn't been outside like minute 2 in the first round in his last 3 fights. And I'm sure Joshua is going to be very well prepared for Ricardo to mix in that grappling, and he's going to have that Gilly Gang repped out. But I think Ricardo is going to be too fast of a striker. I do think he will have the grappling advantage in this fight. So as long as he doesn't blow his load and do too much too fast and put himself in dangerous situations, I'm taking the underdog. I'm taking Ricardo Ramos. I am putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. So I have the Aussie taking the L. King Casey is an Aussie taking the dub. That sets us up for another Aussie, oi, oi. We got Junior, the Juggernaut Tafa. 27 years old with a 5-2 record, taking on Bellator, the Clean Monster Walker. 26 years old with an 11-1 record. Now here, 27, 26 for the heavyweight division. These are some young bloods. We got 2 young heavyweights who are vastly improving their games and that are looking to get a victory and get some respect in the division. Walter is seeking his first UFC win after losing his debut, and both men are big ol' heavy hitters that's going to be looking to add more knockouts to their resume, so don't blink. Breaking it down. Junior has a boxing and Muay Thai style. He is a Brave and RISM alum. He is on a 1-fight losing streak and is 1-2 in the UFC. He is on and all 5 of his wins are via knockout. Now, Walter is a Titan FC alum. He's on a 1-fight losing streak, but is 8-1 since 2022, although he's only 0-1 in the UFC. And 6 of his 11 wins are via knockout. Again, big, heavy hitters. Now, although Walter has more pro wins, Junior has more experience against quality fighters. And both men, again, still very young in their pro careers. And both actually have brothers who have had success in the UFC as well. So they have that to learn from and train with. But I do think that Junior has shown more. I expect him to have the striking advantage. His brother's also a heavyweight. And if Walter can get takedowns, I think he will have the advantage. But I don't know if he tries for that and just tries to win in a slugfest. For that reason, I'm taking the Juggernaut. I'm taking Junior Tafa. But I'm avoiding this on any parlays where possible. So I do have another Aussie victory. Moving into the main card, we have the return of Li, the Leech Jingliang. 36 years old with a 19-8 record, taking on Carlos the Nightmare Protz. He's 30 years old with a 19-6 record. Now, Carlos is on an absolute roll. He's full of confidence right now, but he is taking on a savvy veteran who is well-rounded, has some quality wins, but is looking to get the momentum swung back into his corner. I expect the striking exchanges in this fight to be intense, and it should deliver and be a great way to kick off the main card for Australia. Breaking this down, Lee trains out of Killcliff FC. He has a black belt in BJJ. He is a Legend FC alum and former champion. He's on a 1-fight losing streak, but he has not fought since September of 2022, so almost 2 full years. He did have a spine injury that he was recovering from and has had some time off. And 10 of his 19 wins are via knockout. Now, Carlos is an LFA and Contender Series alum. He's on an 11-fight winning streak, 3-0 in the UFC. 14 of his 19 wins are via knockout, 3 via submission, so 17 of his 19 wins via finish, and 3 of his 6 losses are via submission. He does have a 6.5-inch reach advantage and a 3-inch leg reach advantage as well. Now, when it comes to the striking, I do think Carlos is going to have the speed advantage, but I do think Lee is going to have some power advantage and the grappling advantage. Lee was outstruck by D-Rod in his last fight, which isn't a great thing. And I think Carlos might be better than D-Rod at this point in his career. That was 2 years ago. But the point being is that Carlos is just scratching the surface of his prime. And he is 30 years old. I do think Carlos is going to have success with his kicks in this fight. So Lee is going to have to make this an ugly fight. He's going to have to make Carlos go deep. I think he does that, gives himself a chance to win. 2 years off, he's put a lot in, and I'm assuming that he's really developed his game. For that reason, I'm taking another underdog. I'm taking the Leech, Li Jingliang, but I'm avoiding this on any parlays where possible. Moving on, another showdown of some big dogs. We got Tai Bam Bam Tuivasa, 31 years old with a 15-7 record, and the number 10 next to his name, taking on Jairzinho Biggie Boy Rosenstrike, 36 years old with a 14-5 record, and the number 10 next to his name. Man, this is an awesome matchup between two strikers who live and die by the sword. Tai is fighting with his UFC life on the line. That's kind of wild to think all he's been through because he's only 31 years old and is just now in his prime, especially as a heavyweight. And Jairzinho has struggled against the top of the division because he keeps moving up the rankings, gets losses, go back. But he has walked through everyone else besides the top 6. I do think Tai is going to have a power advantage here, although both men pack a punch. And I do think he will be the aggressor leading the dance. So Jairzinho will probably have success with his kicks and his counters. And the longer the fight goes, I do think it'll favor Biggie Boy, although only 3 rounds. But breaking it down, Tai is on a 4-fight losing streak. He is a fan favorite, but is only 1-4 since 2022. 4 of his last 7 fights have been performance of the night or fight of the night. He shows up, he shows out. 13 of his 14 wins are via knockout. And 3 of his 7 losses are via knockout and 3 via submission. So this guy does not go to decisions. Now, Jairzinho has a kickboxing style. He has the latest finish in UFC heavyweight division history at 4 minutes and 56 seconds of the final round against Olistar Overeem, which gave him the 2019 comeback of the year against Olistar Overeem, and he was also the 2019 newcomer of the year. He is a WLF and EEN heavyweight kickboxing champion. He's on a 1-fight winning streak. He's 2-2 since 2022. He is a Risen alum with 13 of his 14 wins via knockout, and he is rocking a 3-inch reach advantage in this fight. Now, Jairzinho is definitely the more technical striker. The power is close, but I am going to give the advantage to the younger, more desperate fighter in Tai Tuivasa, and I do think this really becomes a slugfest. Every time I've doubted Tai in his career, he has proved me wrong, and I keep referencing him knocking out Derek Lewis as a big difference, as Jairzinho's best win is against older veterans like Junior Dos Santos, Alistair Overeem, and Andrei Arlovsky. This fight really could go either way, but on home turf, I'm taking Tai Tuivasa. But again, I am avoiding this on any parlays where possible. Setting up for the clash of styles, we got Mateusz Gamer Gamrot, 33 years old with a 24-2 record and the number 5 next to his name, taking on Dan the Hangman Hooker, 34 years old with a 23-12 record and the number 11 next to his name. Again, this is a clash of styles showdown. This is a massive opportunity for Dan to move up the rankings, as Mateusz is number 5. And for Gamrot, this is kind of the part of a very long, drawn-out path to the title. The life of a grappler in the UFC these days. But the only grappler Dan has defeated was Claudio Puelles, and he's really more of a submission artist. So I don't really consider him a dangerous grappler. But Dan Hooker did knock out Gilbert Burns in 2018. Although that's 6 years ago, it isn't impossible. Strikers can win. He has the length advantage. He should be able to piece up Gamrot like Jalen Turner did in their fight, although Gamrot won by a close split decision. But I do think this fight comes down to if Dan could get back up to his feet. I'm positive he will get taken down, but can he avoid being smothered and stuck on the canvas? Breaking this down, Mateusz has a wrestling style. He's a southpaw fighter. He trains out of ATT. He has a black belt in BJJ, and he's a good grappler, man. He won gold in the 2014 and 2019 ADCC European Championships, although it wasn't the Worlds. He has the fastest submission by Kimura in UFC history. It only took him 65 seconds against Jeremy Stevens. He is a KSW former champion with 3 successful title defenses and is also a Cage Warriors alum. He's currently on a 3-fight winning streak and is 4-1 since 2022. Now, Dan is an orthodox fighter. He trains out of City Kickboxing. He has a purple belt in BJJ. He's on a 2-fight winning streak and is 1-2 since 2022. 11 of his 23 wins are via knockout, 7 via submission, so 18 of his 23 wins via finish. He likes to get those finishes, and he is long. He has a 4.5-inch reach advantage and a 3.5-inch reach advantage in this fight. Now, I really want to believe Dan is going to come prepared to defend the takedowns. Especially at this point in his career, he's wrestled grapplers, has struggled. You know, both men are in somewhat of the latter parts of their primes, as the prime window is 30 to 35. Gamer is at 33 and Dan's at 34. But I do think that as long as this fight is standing, Dan will have a heyday. Gamrot does train with a ton of great strikers in American Top Team. He is going to be working on a way to be able to close distance. He did fight Jalen Turner. He had to go through the same thing and find an entrance for his takedowns. And then, you know, he probably has improved striking at this point. But how much better can it get? I'm not sure. But in reality, it's going to be a grappling, wrestling heavy approach for Gamrot. And it's a lot of defense for Dan Hooker, especially when you're defending, it wears out your cardio. But this is one of 3 back-to-back City Kickboxers to lead the show. I am taking the favorite, though. I am taking Mateusz Gamrot. I just think he will get those takedowns and hold him down to win the rounds. And I am putting him on a parlay. We are marking that ish down, and we getting that bread, which gives it another Aussie loss, but I did give Bam Bam Tai Tuivasa the victory. All right, so let's jump into the final 2 fights, back-to-back City Kickboxing studs. We have Steve Astro Boy Ursig, 29 years old with a 12-2 record and the number 7 next to his name, taking on Kai Don't Blink Cara France, 31 years old with a 24-11 record and the number 4 next to his name. Steve is actually the true Australian, while Kai is New Zealand. But regardless, both hometown fighters. Another amazing stylistic matchup. The timing of these guys in their careers at 29 and 31, where they're at in their careers, being both in their primes. This is a amazing timing on this matchup. And Steve, who was very, very close to dethroning the current champion, Alexandre Pantoja, and is coming to the UFC and really ran through the rest of his opponents. But Kai, he's had a year off. He lost to Amir Albazi in a very close fight. And I think this is really going to pay off for him, although he was nursing some injuries. But Kai damn near beat Amir Albazi. He was winning against Brandon Moreno until he got TKO'd in the 3rd round. And he's fighting at the best of his ability right now. Steve is going to have to strike with him And I think we'll end up going and providing a lot of good takedowns against Kai because Kai's kickboxing is really that good. Breaking this down, Steve is on a 1-fight winning streak. He is 4-1 since 2022. 2 of his last 4 fights have been performance of the night. He's come in, he's shown up, he's shown out, and 6 of his 12 wins are via submission. Now, Kai trains out of City Kickboxing. 4 of his last 6 fights have been performance of the night or fight of the night. He's also showing up and showing out. He has a blue belt in BJJ. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. He's 1-2 since 2022. Again, took a year off, hasn't been super active. And 11 of his 24 wins are via knockout, which for the flyweight division is very, very impressive. He is also a Risen and Ultimate Fighter alum. Now, as typical flyweight studs, we should see a very high-paced kickboxing bout. And again, I think we will see a good amount of takedown attempts by Steve. But Kai has done very well defensively with the takedown attempts in his previous fights. And when he is taken down, he does get up fairly quickly. But Kai, he's done well going the distance in his fights. He's not accustomed to going late into the fights, although this is not a 5-round affair. Steve has done well and has shown a very good cardio and gas tank. So I don't think either of these guys are going to really gas each other out. Unless somehow Steve grapples his way to victory, I do think Kai is the better kickboxer. He's more technical with his striking. Steve does pack a punch as well, but I see Kai being able to piece him up and force Steve into the grappling. And at this point in the career, I think he's better. I think both men have championship potential, but I think Kai wins on the scorecards. I think he's a better scorecard fighter. I think if this was a 5-round bout, it would more so favor Steve Erceg. For that reason, I'm taking Kai Kara France. We are putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Dricus Stillknox Duplessis, 30 years old with a 21-2 record, taking on Israel, the last style bender, Adesanya. He's 35 years old with a 24-3 record and the number 2 next to his name. Man, oh man, we finally get this much anticipated matchup for the so-called Battle of Africa. That's kind of funny. But this fight was supposed to happen back at UFC 293, but Dricus didn't want to fight so he could heal up his plantar fasciitis in his foot. So Izzy then took on Sean Strickland, and he lost in a lopsided affair. Then Dricus went on and defeated Sean in a very, very close bout. Now, almost a year later, while Izzy is taking time off to heal his own injuries, get his mind back on track, he's getting a 3rd shot at the title. Imagine how great of a storyline it would be if Izzy defeats Dricus and then gets to defeat Sean Strickland in his rematch, and then moves up to light heavyweight one more time to fight Alex Pereira to put a capstone on that quadrilogy before retirement and have a second chance at being champ. Now, who knows if he actually wants to go up to light heavyweight. Dana White actually came out today and said Sean Strickland will be fighting the winner. But what happens if Khamzat Chimaev or Robert Whittaker put on one hell of a show? You know, there's questions to be had there. Especially Khamzat, who hasn't fought for the title before. But breaking this down, Dricus is an orthodox fighter. He has a 2nd-degree black belt in kickboxing. He is the first South African fighter to win the UFC championship. 4 of his last 6 fights have been fight of the night or performance of the night. He's showing up. He's showing out. I got to see him against Brad Tavares in person. That was a blast. Might have even saw one more of his fights. He had the most significant strikes landed per minute in UFC middleweight division history at 6.49. He's on a 9-fight winning streak, 7-0 in the UFC. 10 of his 21 wins are via submission, 9 via knockout. So 19 of his 21 wins have come via finish. He's a finisher. And 5 of his 7 UFC fights have been via finish as well. Now, Israel is a kickboxing style. He trains out of City Kickboxing with a purple belt in BJJ. He had the 2017 Fight of the Year against Alex Pereira in Glory. He was the former middleweight champion with 5 successful title defenses. The first 2-time UFC middleweight champion, looking to be the first 3-time He has the most knockdowns in a UFC title fight, which was 4 against Kelvin Gastelum. He had the 2019 Fight of the Year against Kelvin Gastelum and the 2023 Knockout of the Year against Alex Pereira. He's tied with Anderson Silva for the most knockdowns in UFC middleweight division history with 13. He does have the longest average fight time in UFC middleweight division history at 17 minutes and 49 seconds. He was the 2018 Newcomer of the Year. And for kickboxing, he was the 2016 Glory Champion, the 14 and 15 King of the Ring Champion. He's on a 1-fight losing streak. He's 3-2 since 2022. 16 of his 24 wins are via knockout, and he does sport a 4-inch reach advantage. In reality, Dricus is an absolute brute force who loves to come forward, has cardio for days, especially since he fixed his nose, and is a great grappler. Now, Israel has dominated fighters who like to be brute forces and come forward, as he usually has the speed advantage and the IQ to counter, because he's an amazing counter striker. I am excited to see what game plan Dricus and his team brings to not be too overly aggressive and get caught in a bad spot against Izzy. Dricus hasn't been knocked out in the UFC and hasn't been finished since 2018 in KSW, so I'm not sure Israel is going to be able to finish Dricus. So I am guessing that this fight goes to a decision. And if Izzy can avoid the takedowns and keep this as a kickboxing bout, I do think he has a real chance, especially winning on the scorecards. But Dricus has really shown that he could bring volume over the course of 25 minutes. And I do think Dricus is going to bring the kitchen sink. He's going to bring in a ton of takedown attempts. He doesn't stop moving forward throughout the fight. I doubt that Izzy's going to be able to stop him moving forward throughout 5 rounds. And I'm not really sure if Israel's going to be able to handle all that pressure, especially from what we saw in the Sean Strickland fight. I think Izzy's going to have to bring a ton of kicks. He's going to have to bring a lot of offense, be more of a pure offensive striker like he was early in his career. And he's going to have to keep DDP at distance, keep DDP off him as a pressure fighter. That is very possible, but I think Dricus is just too much of a brute force at this point in his career. He's full of confidence. He's 5 years younger. Israel's been up and down with some wins lately. And the Sean Strickland fight was a complete domination. What does that do to him mentally? I know he's taken the time off. He's supposed to be the best version of himself. And a guy that you wouldn't doubt is the last style bender. But Dricus is coming, and DDP is an absolute freight train. I think he's going to come forward too much, get those takedowns, have success and land big shots on Izzy, potentially even get a finish late in the fight. For that reason, I'm taking Dricus du Plessis, and I am putting him on a parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. An Aussie loser and another underdog. 3 underdogs. They're coming to eat. Hello. But I am excited for the main event. The pay-per-view is really worth the squeeze. The rest of the fights are mediocre. I'm glad that we have more pay-per-view action. Next week, sadly, the next 2 weeks, we have back-to-back Apex events. But next Saturday is a solid Apex card. It's headlined by Jared Cannonier and Kayao Baralho. But that's it for episode 61. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. See you next week.